One thing I realize is how important it is to recognize where our attention is being placed in pretty much every moment. I feel like at the end of the day, your energy is going to go where your attention flows. And I think a lot of us are hyper focused on certain negative outcomes and certain things within our life that don't necessarily benefit us or add to the longevity or happiness or joy that we want to experience. So it's important to sort of de invest a lot of our attention in places that they don't belong. And I've been trying to do this very intentionally recently. Like I stopped listening to music for the past couple of days, and I plan on continuing that for like a good month, just to spend some time with my mind, I guess, or spend some time with the subconscious, because I feel like it's important to get a better grasp on what type of things you're giving your attention and energy into. And I think a lot of things are sort of given to us subconsciously, like we're sort of in a way taught to devalue ourselves and value everything outside of us. So that's why I feel like it's important to sort of give yourself back that value that was taken. And I think all that takes, or all that's needed in order to have that mindset, in order to get to that place, is to start giving your attention more intentionally. I think when it comes to our own development, it's about being intent. It's about finding out what we want to change about ourselves or what we think needs to be changed. Not necessarily to like ourselves, but to make ourselves better. You're supposed to love yourself throughout your changing before you even begin to change, because I feel like love doesn't have a condition, and we shouldn't condition ourselves to having any love for ourselves. So when saying your energy goes where your attention flows, I'm really just saying that we need to be more mindful of where we're placing our view and in our perspective. I think when we allow ourselves to live in a certain negative mindset or in a certain negative headspace about anything that we're enduring, anything that we're going through, we add to it. And you either add to it in a positive or negative way. And I think a lot of us do it in a negative way by not, I wouldn't say acknowledgement is, adding to it. But I would say living in it is adding to it. Certain negative things are supposed to just be certain negative things. And we allow it to be, at times, part of our entire character or part of our entire day, and allow it to sort of govern the lives we live. Not to say that anything isn't negative, not to say you shouldn't feel a way about this certain thing or that certain thing, but when we aspire to create something new, it's important to recognize how important how we feel is, how important our attention is. And if we're only giving our attention to that negativity that we feel within us, then everything else that we, come in contact with, everything else that we see is going to be a reflection of that negativity. Not because it's there, but because it's within us. And that's what we're viewing ourselves. I think it's just important to recognize the way in which we contribute to the life we live via our perspective alone and via our thoughts about everything. I think at the end of the day, how you feel is what you experience. Like if you feel good and you're still in some type of negative quote unquote situation or environment and you genuinely feel good, then it's going to be a good environment. It's going to be a good situation. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean a moral things, or I don't necessarily mean hyper dangerous situations. I mean things that we might, brush off our shoulder, or things that are mundane and able to be sort of victims of our own perspective. And I think when we do have that opportunity, which I think we do a lot of times in life, it's important to invest it into something positive, or important to give ourselves a little bit more clarity in a moment by, unsquinting our eyes, allowing things to sort of be as they are so we can actually see them for where they are rather than what we are. I think a lot of times we run from the world when we're really running from ourselves, or we run from the idea of ourselves, or stuff that we sort of think can break down who we think we are. I think, especially nowadays, I'm getting into the point where I think it's important to sort of drop your ego about a lot of things. Any type of problem that we face, or many of the problems that we face, are really just relationships that we have to our identity, and relationships that our identity has to a situation. Not everything needs to be a problem. And I think the best way to allow things to be as they are is to acknowledge your participation and acknowledge how much we hold on to certain ideas when it comes to those issues. I think it's just about giving ourselves a little bit more in a way of embracing what has yet to come, embracing a subtle positivity about life and a certain love that you have to have for yourself in order to overcome any issue. But it's important to not necessarily get lost within all the problems that we face. I think a lot of us run into obstacles and treat them like they're bigger than the path itself. You might go up a bumpy hill. You might, get a little nicked. But I think overall it's important to keep on going and recognize that, you know, a couple seconds or a couple minutes of some type of bad experience, maybe got in an argument with one of your friends, maybe it's much more severe, blah blah blah, etc., etc. I feel like it's just important, even when it is, overwhelming at times, to sort of accept ourselves with sort of open arms. I think a lot of times when we get into certain situations, we have this expectation that we're supposed to be above it. We have this expectation that we're supposed to, I should be over this, or I shouldn't be feeling like this, or we get almost mad at ourselves for having the feelings that we do. And I think the best way to not get over feeling, but the best way to go through your feelings is to allow them to be. I think a lot of us hold this resistance to certain ideas, but in defense from the world, we're attacking ourselves. I think we're putting up such a wall around our emotions, around who we think we are, that we actually begin to attack ourselves when we, express ourselves in a way that we don't think is normal. All that is to say is, I think we get so addicted to the way that we have been and the way that we are in a way that when we find new ways of expression or find new ways to do something, or if something happens that we feel like it's unbefitting, we get on ourselves more than we acknowledge that there is more possibility within ourselves than we had previously acknowledged. I think it's important to sort of open your horizons and broaden your perspective of yourself, not in a way of simply allowing every negative thing you do just to be like, oh yeah, I did that, but I'm grander than blah blah blah. No, I don't mean that at all. I mean, in a sense of allowing yourself to be once again present rather than stuck in some type of negative circumstance, and using that presence intentionally and truthfully to go towards something more positive rather than hark on yourself for the negative and keep compounding upon it. I think when we allow those certain things to become parts of our character, they express themselves with us without us actually needing to express it ourselves. It's expressed in our subtle actions, and I think it's given to our subconscious in a way that makes us act in a way that's complementary. And that's why I think overall we should just learn to sort of let go of this defense that we're playing. I think a lot of us would benefit from just accepting that we are enough now. Giving yourself enough validity, strength, and security at the moment that you're in to be yourself, not necessarily make it dependent on some sort of external circumstance or some sort of situation in order to find some clarity in who you are. Who we are is not so much found as it is created by our every action. And I think the easiest way to lose yourself is to not let it be found. I think a lot of us aren't letting ourselves be found in our actions because we reject every single part of ourselves that doesn't fit into the box that we've been told that we are in. And I don't I mean this to say that, everybody's in a box, but I feel like in a real sense, authenticity is rare to an extent. And I think in being authentic to ourselves and giving ourselves a little bit more than we think we have, we open the door to doing more than we think we can. And I think once we keep on doing it and learning and rehearsing it and doing it more and more, we'll learn that all the limitations that we have within us are all within us. They're not real things that are in the external world, but more so projections of our own thoughts about our ability and capability. And that's why I feel like it's important to give yourself a broader perspective. Give yourself more strength, give yourself more confidence. Not in the sense of just saying, oh yeah, I'm confident, but feeling it. I think our feeling is always going to be the catalyst for our thought and vice versa. I mean, it just depends whatever you feel like you have more conscious control over. But overall, I think it's just important to get some type of foothold in the door. I think when we don't allow that to happen, then our thoughts and feelings and perspective is going to compound upon itself over and over again until we believe it. And I think that's how certain people get into these negative headspaces where they can't necessarily escape them, because it becomes everything that we are rather than a part. And that's what I mean by not allowing the part to become the whole. You have to accept everything in its totality to an extent. Like if you have some negative parts, that doesn't mean that you should just ignore them. It means also acknowledge the positive. I think we don't cheer for ourselves enough. And I talk about that in videos semi-often, but I feel like we don't cheer for ourselves enough. I think there's always more to give yourself than you give to the situations that you value more than yourself. And that's why I think it's important to rest yourself at your foundation. Because if you can't value what everything's built on top of, then everything's likely to collapse. If you don't have any value or love for yourself, then whenever you try to express that to the world, it won't be so much void of yourself. I won't say it's not genuine to you, but I think it's not a present thing. I think it's more of a thought than it is a being or a state of who you are. And that's why I feel like it's important to sort of come to the present. I feel like the present moment has so much to offer us in terms of just self understanding. Not in a sense of it literally tells you something, but in a sense of when we allow ourselves to be present, I think a lot of the answers to our questions are given to us. Not in a sense of just everything coming out and about, but in the sense of us being present enough to hear, or us being present enough to listen to what actually has been, in our heads over and over again. I think a lot of times when we do negative stuff, we get on ourselves because part of us knew that we shouldn't be doing that or doing this. And even when we allow our perspective of ourselves to be negative and don't allow ourselves to be fully in the moment, we know the certain things that we need to do oftentimes. A lot of times I think that we already know our answers. Not to say that you don't have to go out here and still try to improve yourself or try to learn or try to expand your horizons, but understand that learning isn't done in effort, but in your willingness to listen. And I think a lot of us are trying to effort this learning and effort this self-development when we really need to just listen to the pieces and parts of ourselves that are seeking out change. I think we seek out change just as often as parts of us seek out change within us. I think any type of discomfort we have with ourselves can only be mitigated by yourself. And I think a lot of us look for external solutions to internal problems in ways that aren't truly beneficial to us at all. When we allow everything to become external in that sense, then who we are becomes defined by external circumstance rather than your internal state. Not to say that everything should be governed by your internal state, but I think one thing that we can't predict is the future. Or we can't predict, what's going to happen even a minute from now. But what we do know is we're right here. We do know we're in this moment right now. And if we can't embrace it and if we can't give ourselves that moment, then we'll be even less prepared to actually deal with what has yet to come. We have to be the ones to stand at the forefront of the present moment so we can build the future. If not, then we're constantly going to be repeating the past in our effort to think about it and ensure that it doesn't happen, or become so preoccupied with this notion of what we don't want that we're more likely to create it. I think when we actually open ourselves up to new chances and new possibilities in a sense of being positive about your future, being positive about what has yet to come in a sense of, like, oh, I want to do this. And just feeling good about the fact that you want to do that. Feeling good about, your capability to do that certain thing and giving yourself enough drive and security to actually capitalize off of the opportunities that will get you to that point. But if all we do is focus on the negativity of the past and maybe situations where we failed and weren't able to truly compound upon our opportunities, then all we're going to do is the same thing. Or we're going to sit in inaction in an expectation that the world's just going to open itself to us when we haven't opened ourselves to the world. So if you made it this far, my point is just to be more intent with our energy, or be more intent with our attention and where we're placing it, I guess. If you made it this far, thank you. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. And if you didn't, thank you anyway. I hope you guys are taking care of yourself. I hope you're doing what you can with what you have and treating yourself like a friend. Thank you. More on the way. And